So we're getting ready for our 2E session here. Let's see, I got out of the right one. It's some advanced topics, some deep dives. We're going to have Eamon Foley is going to give us a presentation on pre-post compilers, and then we're going to have Jonathan give something talk on asynchronous jobs. And finally, Russell, you'll be working on, I think, SQL tips and tricks. And that'll take us to the noon hour here. And then this afternoon, we're going to get into the 3-hour session. And like I said, Russell, we probably won't actually use all that time. So maybe at the end of that, you can give some more presentation. So.
Okay, is everybody able to hear me okay?
Let us know if you can hear Eamon, okay?
We can.
Okay, excellent. He's way across the room from the mics here, so that's pretty good.
And hidden from the camera. So, okay, what I want to talk about today, and quick background for those of you who weren't here yesterday. My name is Eamon Foley. I'm the IT operations manager at Fairlight Corporation. I have been doing 2E for about 25 years now. Some of you, a number of you I've probably worked with over many years. So, all right, I'm going to talk a little bit today about the sign-on 2E pre and post compiler options. These are probably not as used as they could be, and do make things a lot easier to work with. So what is the pre and post compiler? So it's actually built into the toolkit, the Y1SY tools, another one of those sadly not well used products that we get. And it's designed to do exactly that. It lets us operate before and after the compile step. It adds a lot of functionality and flexibility for us as developers. There's quite a bit you can do, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's actually built, there's 2 different components you can use. The first one is source code directives. And anybody who's ever looked at sign-on generated code has probably seen source directives that get added into the generated code.
Oh yeah.
So if you've ever gone to a program and done an O to do the compile options and change something in the compile option specific to a particular function, that is how it gets added into the compile step. It actually uses the compiler source directives and it puts that into the program. In addition to that, you can actually do this yourself. You can add these to your own. In addition to that, there's also a global exit program. So there's the ability to add your own code, your own program that will operate before and after the compile steps. So let's start with the source directives. It's the one that's the easiest. Source directives can be done either as pre or post compile. There is a directive that can be added, the Y directives, which allow you to issue commands. Say, for example, you want to call a program before your source code is compiled, or you need to add a library list to your compile option, things like that. It can also occur post-compile. You need to have it, let's say, for example, after it compiles, you've got a routine that goes through and colors the source code, things like that. So those can be added into your programs. There are Z specs. These are the compile overrides. So these are the ones you're used to seeing. And you're not limited to just a sign-on program. If I write a user program, I can have it appear, I can use these Y and Z specs as a part of it to perform necessary steps. The Z spec is used to control, is this pre or post? If I do a spec before the If I do my Y specs first, that happens before I compile. When it gets to that Z, it says, well, if I've got more Y specs after it, those occur after I've compiled my program. So you can control when and where these things occur. So why do I care? Well, some good examples would be, and I think these are pretty common for everybody's run into this at least once. I need to add a library before I compile something. Anybody who has had to do, use Scott Clements' HTTP API program knows that I have to add his library into my library list when I'm compiling, so it picks up those directives in my source code.
Oh, yeah.
So like if you're using,
And same thing with YAJL. It's
Yeah.
got to be there.
it could be because you've got a third party, you're accessing a third party database, and you need to add their library into the library list so you can pick up those additional files that are not normally a part of your list. If you've ever had a CL program that reads a file out of QTemp, you all know how much fun it is when you have to compile that. Okay, well, you can have it create that file in QTemp as a part of the compile step, so that it now already exists when your CL compiles, and now your CL knows the file is there, so it's able to do it. Which means the next time somebody comes along, they don't have to go, why won't this compile? And maybe it's just because for a particular program, you want a different set of compile options. Maybe, for example, you've got a CL program that needs to adopt authority, and it's, somebody didn't put it in the model, or you want to make sure that it always remembers that it has to have that option. You can put the compile option in there ahead of time so that it's always a part of the source code. So for 2E programs, if we're going to be doing something like this, I might create a set of Y specs as a part of user source and then simply put it into my sign-on program. It'll automatically get compiled and placed at the top of the library. It'll immediately go in and be put in the generated code in the appropriate spot, pre-compile.
Oh, that's nice.
If I add some Y specs, a Z spec, and more Y specs, it will correctly put them in the right location so that the things occur pre and post. If I'm doing something like a user program, whether it's a COBOL or RPG or RPGLE or COBOL LE or CLP, I'm able to put the specs in put them in where they need to be. They are based on, for COBOL and RPG, on the fixed format. So if you're doing a free-form RPG program, the free-form starts after these specs because it is still looking for them in a particular location. For CL programs, it actually comes in looking like a comment. If you look at the way the CL is there, it starts /* and then the Y colon or Z colon for a spec, because it comes in it appears as a comment, but the compiler will find it, the pre-compiler finds it and correctly interprets it. So this is also, like I said, this is really useful if you've got handwritten programs that do very specific things. For example, we've got things that deal with accessing, having to call web services or web pages. So having this in there means I don't have to remember to add this to the library list later on. So it just makes this a lot simpler to work with. And then the next guy who comes along doesn't have to remember, oh, I'm supposed to follow these compile instructions. So what about this global option? So the global option is a data area in Y1SY. It allows you to create your own, write your own program that can do all of the work. The other thing is this allows us to do processes that can happen on both files, tables, as well as programs that were written. And you can do some really cool kind of stuff with that. The global option it's a standard set of parameters, whether you're running the pre or post compiler. Usually the compile command was used, the source member, the source file, and the source library. You have all the details you need to do everything else. So what can I really do? So these are a couple of examples. These are things that I've done for real. Post file creation, it automatically starts journaling. In this case, I'd actually built it out so that there was a separate table that says, okay, based on the file that's being created, there are specific journals that are supposed to be used, as opposed to it all being dumped into one journal. Where we were using the Web2E product, whenever a screen was created, whenever a screen was compiled, it automatically ran the step to refresh the framework for that page so that the developer didn't have to remember that that was supposed to happen. Common one we're using right now is pre-compile. We're using SQL for database access. We convert all of the select stars into select field names. So we go in and rewrite the source code pre-compile to replace the select star with select field name, something that Broadcom has not done in 20 odd years of SQL service being available. Some other examples would be logging compile tasks, who compiled something. This is especially useful for those places where you have multiple developers and the code that goes out isn't stamped with the developer who compiled the code because it runs through change management and it's assigned to a different person. This can let you track, every time something gets compiled, well, who last compiled the code as opposed to just looking at who generated that code. So that's really kind of it. It's
Pretty neat.
It's a pretty useful little tool. It's a fairly underutilized process. Yeah. Along with the presentation, I'm going to put out a piece of paper. And for those of you who are really old school, that I got from Rory Hewitt back in the day, that goes into a little more detail and depth about what you can do and what options are available. So I'll have Mark include that with the presentation.
Okay. Sounds good.
I forgot to show this the last time. This is my contact info for anybody who wants to get to me. It is on the other presentation. I just forgot to get to that page.
Very good.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've seen you do a lot of good things with pre and post compile. All right. Any quick questions for Eamon before we go on?
Hey, this is Russ. I'm a big fan of pre and post compile. Didn't actually think I could do it in the CL. And I noticed when you're I guess what you do is a slash asterisk Y. Is there a colon? Is that colon required for the CL part?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yep, I use this all the time. I actually last year's presentation, which showed how to do a display file that refreshes itself after 2 minutes. So you continuously just watch it refreshing. And I use the pre and post compile to do that. So check that presentation out.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Russ. Any other comments or questions? All right. Silence means there aren't any at this point. So we will be going to Jonathan. You get to do talk, and you're going to be talking about, what is it you're going to talk about this?
Asynchronous processing using data queues.
All right. So here these are the deep dives. So we're getting into some things that you don't generally see with 2E. It's all stuff you can do, but not something that's commonly done. So,
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Jonathan Bolton, and this is something I discovered in the ERP system that I was working on for many years. And once I figured out what they were doing, they were called unattached jobs in the app, in the package that we had. And I saw the value of them. So I created a few of my own because they are beneficial for performance. So the objective here is to introduce you, if you don't know about data queues, and show how I feel they can improve an application's performance. So what is a data queue? Okay, and I got this directly from IBM, and they say data queues are a type of system object that you can create to which one high-level language, procedure, or program can send data, and from which another HLL procedure or program can receive data. So I like their language. So what are the advantages of these things? If you use them correctly, they can free a job from performing some work, typically print jobs or communications with other systems. What they allow you to do is you can offload these tasks to a different job stream so that they're not running in your main job stream, because some of these things may take some time. So, and from IBM again, data queues are the fastest communication method between two jobs, beating database files, message queues, and data areas that I picked up from IBM. So that's probably a very interesting statement. So specifics, the maximum length is 64,512 bytes. If you need more than that, I think you have too much data. Maximum size is 16 megabytes. Again, a lot of data. And they can be accessed in one of three ways, either FIFO, LIFO, or keyed access. Typically, I saw them used as FIFO. Usages between jobs on one system and between jobs on different systems, remote data queues. That could be a topic all by itself. I discovered that in doing research for this talk. We could do that someday. So I'm only going to discuss jobs on one system. But the between jobs on different systems, if you're in that environment, that's a very interesting concept. So there are three data queue commands: create data queue, clear data queue, and a delete data queue. That do is actually what they say. They either create them, clear them, or delete them. Now, inside your high-level program, there are APIs that you can call to send data to and receive data from these. And they're QSNDDTAQ for sending and QRCVDTAQ for receiving. Now, if you're running a recent operating system, and here it was 7.4 at Technology Refresh 1 or 7.3 at Technology Refresh 7 or higher, you can do some of this in SQL. And if the commands are data queue info, clear data queue, send data queue, receive data queue. Assume the underscores, I wasn't going to say them in the presentation. So, real world example. A manufacturer of storage batteries used in standby power applications needs to order a seismic rack from a vendor when certain configurations of batteries are ordered by an end user. A solution is needed to automate the creation of the needed purchase order when the customer order is scheduled for production. A little background, this is what I did. I'm talking about batteries that are the size of typical office waste baskets. They are considered flooded batteries. They have lots of sulfuric acid in them, hence the need for a seismic rack that is going to withstand an earthquake. For those of you in the United States, Verizon ran an ad, probably about a year or two ago, showing a data center in Tampa where they took you into the battery room and you saw these big batteries on big steel racks. That's what I'm talking about. So the solution here is to create two new programs. You create a program to receive the data queue information and a program to create the purchase order. And then you either create a new program or modify existing work to send required information to the data queue to allow purchase order creation. Now, the goal here is to send just enough information through the data queue that the receiving program can go figure out what it needs to get. So in our case, it was basically, say, a customer order, the keys for that, or purchase order. But again, you're not trying to send, a lot of the data if you don't have to. And then the sending program uses the API to send data queue to send in our case, the item number to the receiving program. And then logic that exists in the sending program, excuse me, to determine whether or not you need to send this item number. That's the beauty of this. This kind of work is where it not everyone needs to be done. So you do the decision up front here, and then if it's one, you just throw it over the fence and let the other guy take care of it. The receiving program, on the other end, uses the receive data queue to interrogate the data queue and return data if any is found. Now, for that to work, this program has to be active on the system at all times, but in a wait status. So it only wakes up on a periodic basis to check for data in the data queue. And then for modularity, then this program then calls a routine that does the actual work, so that if these do start to come in, you're handing it off yet another time. But and typically what you would do is you would wrap this thing in some kind of a CL with a delay job instruction that it would wake up, and it depending on your activity, maybe every 30 seconds, maybe it doesn't need to be that long. You can really batch this stuff out. But again, the thing just sits there, goes to sleep, wakes up, checks the data queue. If there's anything there, it does something. Otherwise, it just immediately goes back to sleep and just sits there all the time. And then for purposes of overall job scheduling, you have a method to start this thing up, say at the beginning of your business day or beginning of your processing day, and then shut it down when you go into, end of day processing. That's pretty much it. I found that they worked very, very well. They are a big performance improvement because you push this entire other process off someplace else. It's running its own job stream. Your main job stream's unaffected. It's just, call the other guy, said, go do this for me, and away we go. Questions?
Can I just couple of points? So we use this technique quite a lot. You don't need to put your job into delay. On the receive data queue, there's a wait parameter, and you can actually tell it to wait forever.
Okay. The code I had seen they kind of worked like that. I knew there was a wait built into it, but I thought they had a small delay job. I could be mistaken.
Yeah, you can have. Yep. And the second thing is we actually use a keyed data queue, so that we can issue a shutdown when we want it to shut down from a central controlling program. So if we want to shut down the job, we send a special character we have a one long key field, and if I think if we chuck a star into the key and the program receives that, it just goes, all right, I'm going to shut down. So anything that's sitting on the queue after that will be waiting there for the next time.
Okay. My source for this was Infor.exe, otherwise known as Mapix. And the examples I all found were, FIFO data queues. Yep.
No, well, we've been using it for 20 or 30 years in our warehouse management system. So, and we use it quite extensively. In fact, we use it for our triggering web service calls and things where we want to make it asynchronous from the job that generated the request. So, but anyhow, you can.
Hey, this is Russ. That was great. I actually was going to do a similar data queue presentation, but because of time, didn't. I remember years ago I had put in a ticket to Broadcom to ask if there was a way of passing an array from one external function to the other, and the $20,000 answer was no. But I discovered that if I put a data queue in QTemp, sent the array into the data queue, then I could read it from the external function. That was my introduction to data queues. Since then, I use them all the time, similar. we used to have we have one file, it's an input file where all the packages will just bombard this file with data. And it used to be processed one record at a time. But now what I do is I send that input file, which is unkeyed because sometimes we reprocess data, and I send that into data queues. And then I submit multiple jobs, which I can control how many jobs process at the same time in order to kind of multi-thread the process, because the data is all set up in little data queues, and then just let it wait. And as it builds, it just processes the data. And that's improved our processing by about 30–40% because we can process so much more data.
Right.
Probably the most interesting use that I found in Mapix for this. Mapix, of course, had years ago purchased Sign-On Financials, which is why I mentioned it, and Americanized it. And whether this was true in the original offering from Sign-On or whether this was what Infor had added, one of the key files, the general ledger summary file, actually exists in two versions. There's the general ledger summary file and the general ledger summary mirror file. The reason for this is transactions were only allowed against the summary file, and all reporting took place against the mirror file so that you never had a conflict there. And they used one of these data queue driven processes to keep the mirror file in sync with the main file.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Any other comments or questions about data queues?
Data queues in the past, like I'm talking 20, 30 years ago, used to have a habit of getting corrupted. And I think IBM may have sorted that out by now. But one thing we have is the ability to rebuild the data queue, because obviously the data is not persistent. So if the data queue becomes damaged, you need some way of rebuilding it. If that's yeah. So just bear that in mind when you're designing it or using them. That how do I rebuild the data queue from scratch if I need to?
Thank you.
Also a note is once you read a data element out of a data queue, it's gone, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but I did find, I can find the link somewhere in AS400 type of querying on the Google querying, some source code that would allow me to read the data queue, display it to see what data is in it, and it would preserve the data queue.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, because there's no easy command to take a look at these things. I did discover that too.
So,
Yeah.
so anyone who has TAA tools, which if you don't, you really should look at that product. But one of the commands is display data queue contents, and I use that now. But if I can find that link, maybe what I'll do is post it in the Facebook forum to show you how you can just cut and paste a CL code that will allow you to interrogate a data queue. And that's been invaluable to me, especially in testing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Anyone else have any comments? If not, Russ, it looks like it's time for you to get connected and begin with your talk.
So what should we do? Continue where I left off and just stop when I'm out of time and continue the rest later?
Yeah,
or just jump right in?
Why don't we do that? Continue where you were. That way we get a full present, concept of what you're talking about. And then if we have time, we'll move into that other session later.
Okay, let me just set up my screen here. Just give me 1 sec. You see a screen?
Not yet.
Oh.
I see your name, but I don't see your screen yet.
Oh, let me just. Now? Do you see anything?
No, just see your name.
Oh boy. Sorry guys, just give me a second here. I'm technically challenged. Let's try that.
Yeah.
And share.
Okay, there we go.
Nice. And you can
Perfect.
hear me? You can hear me
Yep.
okay?
Yeah, we can hear you good here. I'm sure online, does it sound good?
Okay, give me a sec because I have to get back to my notes now.
Okay,
For some reason, I thought we may have been taking a break, but it's fine. I should be able to get through this. Let's see. So lightning talk. Oh, can someone do me a favor? I made a change to the presentation. You can see I put QR codes here. If someone's got a phone, can you scan one of these QR codes? What it should do is take you right into the video. And if that's the case, it'll make it a lot easier for me to send this presentation in its pure form without the video files. And then you can just QR to get the video files. So I'll start, but if someone has an opportunity to do that, that'd be great. So I think we were talking about screen design, and I was at, where was I? I think 16 minutes in. So just give me a second, get to about here. Because I think someone from the audience was talking to me about why do all this when you do it in templates? So that's coming up. Let me just finish my train of thought on this, which was dynamically on the fly after implementation, being able to change the subfile controls and the functions. So let's continue that video and just to see some of the other interesting things that I came up with. This evolved, this whole thing of changing this dynamically has evolved over time. So here I'm just putting in a bunch of garbage here. And so you can see I have the bottom line here. This is how it'll look on a 120 column or 130 column display, which is what this one is. And here on the top, you see a question mark to select options. That's because I have this little cheat indicator. So if it goes past this red here, I know it'll spill onto 80. It won't fit on the 80 column display. So I have to default it. But sometimes I do want to show more details. So for this case here, I want to do a show dash values. But on this screen, all I wanted to say is show. So let's get out. And oops, what did I do here? Come on. Oh, I might have cut that part out. The idea is here, show with whatever values. So I have this blank field here, just talk about it. So I would put in, here we go, 4. So that means show the first 4 characters up here, but the rest would appear when I do the question mark. Get it? So it allows me to really make that screen, those options really detailed, documented nicely, and show short forms. So that's the idea of the using the command. So if I look, I'm just going to try and create a quick display file from scratch. But before I do that, I'm going to explain the template. But it's spelled template. So I'm not sure if you guys know about this template function. Whatever you put in here will get copied into any new, not existing, but new stuff. So it's our version of inheritance. So in my template for display file, I have at the first level, all this stuff. Second level, I have, this builds the header and the footer. And here, this is source code. So I have to either comment out if I'm doing an 80 column or a 132 column, I need to change the source code slightly, change the code slightly using source code. And then here, notice now, if you saw that, it was a little fast. I had my entire screen designed with the highlighting and everything in its nice position, the way I explained yesterday, what I would go through manually. So I thought, well, we have templates. This is great. We can do all this in templates. And I believe someone made that suggestion yesterday. So again, in my screen options, this is where I validate my screen my subfile options, and in commands, this is where I would validate my subfile options. So there's code that I chuck in here all over the place. If you guys want, I could do a lightning, although Russ Berkeley doesn't really do lightning presentations. It takes longer than that, but I could do a full in-depth how all this is done. Let's just go and create a display file straight from scratch to just show you how things work with the templates. Okay. It's created, and you'll see at the bottom how it copied it from the templates, which is what I expected. And when I go into screen design, look at what happens. So this was another ticket I sent to Broadcom to say, I did all this in templates, but in screen design, it doesn't accept the templates, the changes. And they responded back, yeah, you're right. Maybe in future versions. This was 6 years ago. So yeah, Broadcom, gotta love them.
Yeah.
Okay, so to answer the question on the template, I still have to, even though I have it in my template, and I did that in case one day sign on version 29.2 will have this, you still have to do your screen designs manually for every screen. And I mean, I used to work in, and I'll tell you, the name was called Obsidian. So I worked in Obsidian. So I loved inheritance. And I thought when I saw templates, that would have been great. But unfortunately, no. The only thing that does come in are all those options in the action diagram. That's what will get inherited into your new functions. Again, any existing functions, that inheritance, there is no inheritance. But what I would do then is just go into that template and use my notepad to cut and paste those 4 sections into my anything that was previous that I want to change into this new functionality. So that's kind of my quick and dirty of doing that. So I think that's really what I wanted to just finish up yesterday. Yeah, I'm going a little deep into how I created all those functions and that, but for the most, so here, the display file is created now. So you'll see it's an empty, no functions, no header. So what I got to do is go in and add them. So after I've promoted it into production, I would go into a function, and believe it or not, kind of funny, after hearing the presentation from Iman, I'm going to use the post processor to actually do this part for me in future versions. So that will save me doing this manually. So thanks for that little tip. But basically, I just go in here and I just put in my function options. And as I put them in up here, it'll start showing me what it's going to look like on the screen, on the final screen. Oh, I pushed the pause button there. So that means 1 is select, and option 2 is view. So you see I got a select and a view, and it can be used in both an 80 column and a regular display. There you go. And then I would do the same thing with the functions and just build it. I also wrote a little bit, I would call it 2E artificial intelligence, to basically calculate the spacing so that I had an even distribution of spacing. It took me a while to just run a bunch of calculations of the string to figure out how to make it easy to space these out. So it's not all squished together, it's spaced out. So that's just extra little things. And, you know, this just keeps evolving over time, but that's kind of how the screen design works. So I'll say good enough for that. That's the last part of the conversation I wanted to cover off. I do see a chat thing, but I'm really not watching the chat. So maybe I can circle back to that later. and I'm ready to start the next presentation, which I think is 34 minutes long.
Okay, we have about 20 minutes almost, so we'll get
Yeah.
a fair bit of it.
Let's see what we can do. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is by SQL, and some people may know SQL. Let me just emphasize that. As I said, I took over 7 years ago from a gentleman who'd been working in ICS 30 years. Believe it or not, he did not know STR-SQL existed. Never used SQL in his life. Everything he did was just creating any type of, sweeping a file, updating. He would just create 2E functions to do it continuously. He had no idea how that SQL existed. So I showed him this, and it was like an eye opener. Of course, he was retiring. He didn't really care. That's a side note. Back to the show. What you just saw there is this is a little annoyance for me. Work spool file. Okay, so here are my spool files. So I'm going to kind of tell a story. This is more just for your own ideas as I tell a story of my life. So I do work spool files because I want to see what my last spool file was. And in this case, I paged down about 3 or 4 times to find the last spool file, because it's sorted in descending order instead of the other way around. I want to see the most current spool files at the top. And it was getting it to be an annoyance. So I wrote a function, DPE. I don't know what the DPE stood for, but what did this function do? It basically did a work spool file star print. And initially, years ago, before I learned about SQL tricks, it would then copy that spool file to a flat file. And then I would read that spool file through CL and build a 2E file, which is sorted by date and time, descending order. So now this DPE command interrogated my spool files. It displayed it to me in this format from highest to lowest. And here I can either email this spool file to myself as an attachment or embed it in the email. I can view it, I can delete it, release it, or print it. Now watch as I pause the video, it's going to go through all that because I just got so excited. But there's my spool files. Now for me, I may not want to see job logs. So I filtered on the job logs with an F6. So I filter out my job logs to just get me spool files. And away you go. So imagine when you're compiling something, not in 2E, obviously, just a regular source code, and it's crashing on you. Now you could just do compile if it crashed. Now I can use a preprocessor to say, if it crashed, pull up this screen and show me the top spool file that will allow me to interrogate and see what's going on. Here's going to a printer. So it checks what depot or branch you want the printer to go to and selects the printer and away you go. Here's a condition where it's doing email. And I'm going to do it as an attachment. So I'm going to say yes. And then I'll do another email, but I'm going to change this to a no. And you'll see the 2 types of emails. If you want to see more of how I do these emails, that's in my presentation that I did last October. So here's my spool file. It's not an attachment. It's embedded in the spool file in HTML. So yes, through HTML, I can, from the 400, I can send an email. And here it is as an attachment. And from there, I can attach it. So that's the application. So that's the deep dive. So what I'm going to do now is show you how I developed that quick and dirty system. I know you guys could probably just figure it out yourself, but this is what I did. So work spool file star current star print is what you need to do first. That creates your spool file. And we'll take a quick look at the job, page down. That's my spool file, raw spool file. So now I posted something about this on the Facebook forum a few months ago. It is possible to use SQL to query a spool file. So you don't have to copy it to a flat file. you could query it directly as a spool file. And this is the syntax for it. Now I'm on 7.4. I believe it was working when I was on 7.2. So try for yourself, but this is the nomenclature that you need. And you can see the spool file name is that. Select asterisk is going to give me all of it. So here it is in its pure form as, one big text file in spool file format. Okay, so that's fine, but that's not what I really want. When you do it this way, you get two fields. Basically, you get an ordinal position and then the actual data set. So so this is actually two fields. So why don't I just put in an order by ordinal position in descending order?
Yeah.
There you go. Now I just flipped my spool file. Ordinal position, descending order. Still has some stuff I don't like to see when I don't like to see the page and the headers and all that fun stuff. What I want to see is, as I'm looking at this, is I want to see our Berkeley's spool files. Okay, so why don't I add to that and put in where a certain position is equal to our Berkeley? Oh, I got ahead of myself. So before I even did that, why don't I break up each field using the what's it called? My mind just went blank. Substring.
Substring.
Thank you. My mind went blank there. Now I'm querying it, and now it's more looking like a file, right? That's what I want, a file. But I still got this nonsense that I don't want. I want our Berkeley. Is this rocket science to you guys? Have you seen this? Is this? Come on, Russ. We know all this stuff because that most of this presentation is about how to do this type of manipulation. So here we go. Our Berkeley descending order. Very good. So I didn't use ordinal position. I decided to use the actual date and time in descending because I can do that. Right. See, this is what I want to do. I like this O because it means, ideas are flowing, and that's what I want. If I knew then what I knew now, wow, that's the topic. So now I have a structured field SQL. Okay. Just a side note, because I work in 2E in RPG and in DDS. I don't do SQL stuff. One day I think I might get into that. So my spool file management file is this, all those fields that I just defined earlier. And there was audits because I'm just a habit for putting audits, but I don't use them because what happens is the spool file when it runs, when I type DPE, it copies it all up into QTemp. And then I'm going to use SQL to populate it, the empty file in QTemp, because multiple people use this and I don't want it journaling the file and sending data into my HA system. It's just a quick and dirty spool file. So let's go into the DPE function now, just for kicks. Oh, I'm not going to go. I'm going to do it manually first. So create dupe object of that, and I put an asterisk just after the P, and that's going to bring into QTemp the physical file and all of its logicals, as long as they're obviously in the same library, but they should be. Okay, so now I have a QTemp file. Now back to SQL. So here's my SQL select. I'm going to insert 2 lines at the top. I'm pretty sure I'm going to insert 2 lines at the top. Yes, I am. And I'm going to insert a SQL statement that says, wait for it. Boom. Insert into QTemp, that file, those fields in brackets, and you're going to get the data from the select statement. I'm going to put a comma there. I'm going to do a comma, a question, parentheses right on. There you go. And hit enter. Boom. I just populated my TUI file with the data. Okay. The way I wrote that spool file management is that I know that these 4 fields are the key, so I'm not going to get duplicate records, so I don't have to worry about non-key, but here you go. Very simple trick to quickly just proving the magic is not behind the scenes, it actually works. So it's a very simple trick. So let me blow away the Q temp. Now, I don't want to leave some of you hanging with that, so I'll take you through what the DPE function looks like. And again, this is not written in stone. Do what you want, take these ideas and use it in your shops however you see fit. So DPE, so I got a command, DPE, it's got a command and it has the user. Okay, user. I did that now because now I can DPE, put an F4 and I can DPE QSEC offer and look at the QSEC offer spool files. So it comes in handy when I need to check a user spool files. I can just put in their name. If it's blank, it defaults to me, to my user profile. So I allow the users to use this command. Here's my parameter. My comments, I found this on a website one day and I thought this is cute. So I put this in all my, this is my signature because I'm in a green screen and I need to entertain myself. So that's how I entertain myself. I got a SQL command and then I have this Q for quotes. It's length 1 with 4 quotes. That'll come in handy as you see building the spool file or this SQL command later on. Here's the command, work spool file to the print for the user. You can see if the user is blank, I use myself, retrieve job action. I check to see if it's in QTemp. If it's not, I create dupe obj and I clear it. Here's the command that I just showed you. Boom, boom, boom. So I have to build it as a command. Boom, boom, boom. And you'll notice when you're building the command and you have quotes, you need to double quote them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's important. I found that instead of double quoting it, it made more sense to use this Q and Q when I'm doing fields. It just made it easier in the SQL command to double quote R Berkeley. Then I run this thing. Really, it only fails once. So I run SQL. If it fails, then I create a data area in QTemp and I move my SQL command here into QTemp so I can see what went wrong. I can cut and paste it into start SQL and play around with it till I get it working. So that function is actually turned into an external function that I use throughout my system, and it always makes sure that my SQLs work. And I just delete qprint SPLF because I don't need to see that. That's just the spool file. And then it runs the display file. Simple enough. This command, delete dependent logicals, and that's just me because of my university background. I would lose marks if I didn't clean up my system, my programs at the end. So there's the DPE.
So Ross, do you
Yes.
know about query management queries? Have you ever run start query management query?
No, I have not.
Right, because you can actually put your your SQL into permanent objects and just run the query management queries.
But it's variables. It's not that wasn't hard coded. Like I had to, in this particular case, I had to pass in a username. So it was always a different query.
No, the beauty of start query management queries, you can pass parameters into it.
Nice. Okay. I will take that offline and check that out. Thanks.
I first discovered that because we didn't have interactive SQL initially where I worked. And query management queries is a poor man's way to do SQL. It takes a little more work, but you know, when you're waiting for a license or they're not going to buy it, it allows you to use SQL syntax at least part of the time.
Nice. Okay. All right. I wrote that down. I will, something to learn. So another example, I think I actually posted this on Facebook. Here's a case where I don't know if anyone's ever seen this message wait. I just recently discovered it because I hired someone new. Never seen it in my life. No, I'm kidding. So you get a message wait. And we're not a robot shop, so because we don't want to pay for robot. So I need to know when I have message waits. And not only do I need to know, but I need to inform my help desk. So I used a similar approach. I did a work active job for the subsystems in question, sent it to a file. Then I used SQL to query that print file. And depending on time, I could run through, I mean, you have the video, but basically it's the same idea. This time I'm using SQL to query the work active job. So what happens is I do a similar thing. I'm going to talk high level because I'd rather spend the time talking on an open forum than going through this. So here's my message wait. I send it to a file. If the file exists in QTemp, then I'm going to email this file to my support team, and the support team will get either a page or a text message saying we got a message wait. So this is how I am able to quickly grab message waits. We have a job that just runs constantly in the background, my equivalent of a robot job, the poor man's robot job, and it checks every 5 minutes, and if it finds it, it blasts it off. That's how it started. That job, actually, poor man robot job, turned into a huge thing where it would check an input file, and if I saw data, then I would launch into my data queue manager and process data, and it would do all sorts of stuff now. So it's actually become almost like a robot job. But that's what this is all about. So this is, again, me doing SQL on that. Now there is a little more SQL I wanted to show. Oh, yeah, this is a good part of it. So with the message wait, I did not create a TUI function and display files. I didn't want to do any of that with the message waits. All I wanted to do was check if a file has data in QTemp. So instead of using the insert command on this work active job spool file, I used this create table QTemp message wait, and then here I put at the bottom with data. So that's the difference between the two. So bypass TUI altogether, just create this file in QTemp with data. I just got to get my syntax right on this because it's a cut and paste. There we go, with data, and it'll create the file. And then with CL, I just query the file. So I don't even use TUI to do this process. Okay. And okay, now taking the advice of this new query management tool, I've got some homework ahead of me, but let me show you where I went with this. This is me going, what I knew, if I knew then what I know now. I'm going to blow everyone's minds, I hope, on this one, next one. So here's the story. Russ, we have our pin inquiry system. I showed you this before. This display file has millions of pins, as you can imagine. Customer service has a little report that they have in Excel where they will go through for like our key customers, and they will cut and paste that Excel spreadsheet into this search and check to see if the pin has been delivered or not. And then they come up with all sorts of, we have SLAs to make sure our pins are delivered right away. So this is a test environment, so this only has 13,000, but in production, it's way over 30 million records in this test file. So yeah, Russ, how do we do this faster? We got the spreadsheet and we got we got to go through cut and paste all the time to do stuff. So the spreadsheet turns into a text file. So here's a text file of all the pins that a customer service person will cut and paste one at a time and check to see if these pins were delivered. So let's go back to my TUI upgrade FTP presentation. When they told me this, I said, you know what, let me whip something up for you guys. And so what I whipped up, I told them, was an apple pie. And it's funny because that name became the function that they now use all the time. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Let me just make that. So I got a whole bunch of data, whatever data elements you want, it's a subset of your transaction file, if you will. And I said, okay, I created an apple pie. Here it is. As you can see, it's in QTemp. It's a TUI file in QTemp. So the first option was, why don't we do this? I'm going to give you the ability to do F11. F11. Okay. And just cut and paste into this raw TUI file, which only has 2 fields in it. It's got a key, and it's got just one long field for pins. So they did this, and they were happy with this. I wasn't, but they were. So overemphasizing this, but what happened was when it came back out, pausing. Oh, sorry, pausing here. So this display file only has one, let's say just one record. It has this. And as I display it, I do retrieve objects to get the data from the other production files to display it here. So now they could see right away what's been delivered, sorted, and everything for their subset of data, instead of going one at a time. So they thought that was really good. I hemmed and hawed on that, and I thought, well, why not do this? Let's blow all this away. Why not take that Excel spreadsheet, FTP it up, and populate that TUI file that's in QTemp? And that became the F12 upload. So they have on their PC a text file that they'll set up. So this follows the same FTP type of procedure that I had showed you how to upload your save files in TUI. Boom, boom, boom. Put RB Burke into the IFS. Good. So that's what this function is doing. They said yes. And then I copied from the IFS into here, and I show them this. So now they don't have to cut and paste. They can do more work. And they thought, oh my God, this is God's gift to the world, is to do this. But I still didn't like it because I'm Russ and I'm working in a 5250 world, and I just need to always improve myself. If not for the users, for my own sanity. So I'm just trying to find here. Yeah, here's the text file. So it's basically, it's the first 4 letters of the person's name, just to make it unique. There's a text file that copies across. So where's my time? I'm going to run out of time.
You're 6 minutes over.
Over? Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
This presentation is 34 minutes. I'm 22 minutes in. The last part is the treat. So I could do the treat this afternoon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a keynote we've got to get to.
Yes. Okay. So I'm at 22:28. So the trick will be really cool for you guys to see. So I'll stop sharing at this point. And how do we go to the keynote? Is it a different Zoom link then?
I think so. I don't know. Mark had to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's no CM First employees here. Yeah, just a part-time contractor who's a newbie.
Okay, I'm looking on my notes here. I don't see 12 to 12:30, and then training sessions at 1:30. So I guess it's lunchtime now.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, and then we're starting up again at 1:30. Do you want me to just stay and finish this and then just take a later lunch? It's up to you.
Yeah, no, we've got to go if we want to get lunch.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll circle back this afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Ross.
Yes,
Do you want
I'll
to
stay on the-
line?
Pardon?
You want to stay on the line? I'll just
I,
just.
yeah, unfortunately,
to.
it's going to end the session.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to open it, like I have a free flow discussion. So maybe at the end of my afternoon presentation. Yeah. Because again, I work in a silo. I'm in Toronto, Canada. There is no one for a billion miles around that has 2 E's. So this is my own stuff, guys. So help
There.
is my thought here. All right. We'll talk to you guys after lunch.
All right. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.